Welcome to the Fire Sprinkler Podcast with Chris and Logan. AGF Manufacturing is pleased to announce the trusted test and drain valve has been redesigned with 2 bypass drain ports to give contractors flexibility when installing the pressure relief valve drain line. AGF's test and drain is also now available in 1-inch, 1.25-inch, and 2-inch grooved connections to expedite installation. Learn more at agfmfg.com and check out AGFU to learn about upcoming webinars and other new products like the 3-way valve and space-saving corner riser. AGF, improving the fire sprinkler industry since 1986. Hello everyone, and thanks for tuning into this episode of the Fire Sprinkler Podcast. This episode is another of the NFSA follow-ups from the virtual seminar that took place at the end of April and the beginning of May. My guest today is Jim McHugh from AGF Manufacturing. There were a few interesting questions that came up, some not really related to Jim's presentation, but being the guy Jim is, he placed some calls, did some research, came up with some pretty good answers. I've been getting a lot of new hits on the podcast lately, so if you're new, welcome. If you took a quick break and are coming back, also welcome. And to everyone else who regularly follows the podcast, as well as the new listeners, thank you very much. Social media, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, LinkedIn. Find me, follow me, share me. Thanks to everyone for the support. Hashtag Fire Sprinkler Podcast. And without further ado, here is the NFSA follow-up with Jim McHugh. Enjoy.
Like and subscribe.
Hey, everybody. Thanks for tuning in to this episode of the Fire Sprinkler Podcast. Jim McHugh is on. Jim is with AGF, and he was a presenter at the NFSA Virtual Conference 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago, 6 months ago, whenever you listen to it. This is the question and answer portion of the conference. I'm going to go through a bunch of the questions that were asked in the chat bar while Jim was presenting. As everybody here knows, maybe don't know, they were all pre-recorded videos. So the questions were posted for follow-up by me and Jim now. Jim, how's it going today?
Very good, Chris. Very nice to catch up with you.
Yeah, you keeping your hands clean?
Trying. It's to the point they're chafed.
Yeah, I get it. We're going through hand sanitizer like crazy here. Hand sanitizer and booze, it's weird.
Well, we combine them. We actually have a local distillery here called Five Saints Brewing. It's in a historic firehouse. You can look it up online. And they cut a deal to sell that unused portion at the top of the process of distilling to a local person, and we ended up buying 5-gallon buckets of sanitizer, and then we portioned it down into spray cans and gave it out to all of our employees.
A lot of the distillers and brewers around here, like in the southwestern Ontario region, are doing the same thing, donating them to the hospitals and to the first responders, firefighters, paramedics, things like that. It's been really good to see the positive. There's a lot of negative that comes out with the COVID pandemic. But it's good to see everybody kind of coming together to help.
Yes.
Stay safe.
Yep.
So let's kind of get into the questions here. What we'll do is I'll read the question as it was worded in the chat bar, and then we'll kind of go over a little bit of context and then get the follow-up answer. Sound good?
Yeah, that works.
Awesome. Okay, so the first question was, you are not being fair to the NFPA committee. The ITC, Inspector's Test Connection, can be located at the remote end to let air out while filling the systems, and an ITC, Inspector's Test Connection, near the water supply can be used as an alarm test connection. Why weren't you being fair to the NFPA committee?
I don't actually know why the person questioned that. I mean that certainly is their opinion. I looked at that and I said, well, I mean, there's a couple different ways I could respond to that. I certainly did not intend to not be fair.
Right.
I'm making a presentation that it's going to be colored with my opinion and my interpretation of what is in the code. And I thought during my presentation, I tried to make as specific sections of code reference as possible. That's why I actually included that NFPA disclaimer. Specific to that person's question where they talked about, having an inspector's test connection at the remote end of the system, and then a second inspector's test at the front of the system. When I initially read it, I said, well, right out of the gate, how many people do you know put in 2 inspectors test connection when only 1 is required? So,
so the only time really
wouldn't really call it an inspector's test connection, but the fitter in me
Right.
always put an inspector's test connection at the far end of the system. And then an alarm test if you're putting in an alarm valve. Alarm valves are kind of few and far between nowadays, but
Right.
I wouldn't call it inspector's test connection. I'd call it an alarm test valve.
And I mean, not to get overly code wonky, but there is no such thing as an inspector's test connection in code.
Okay.
The specific wording of that. But I understood the person's intent of their question.
Right.
What I would point out is the assumption that the inspector's test connection at a remote point from the supply, so potentially at the end of the system, has been out there for decades. Predates probably my birth when it comes to the piping design. If you could say that the inspector's test connection at that remote inspection is an adequate air vent, then why are we having the same problems with corrosion that we are?
Right.
So, I'll put an asterisk. I actually believe that the remote inspector's test could be a satisfactory air vent if in the design it is accommodated that that specific line is fed from as close as possible the highest point in the system.
Right.
What I found in practicality, though, looking at on real world situations, rarely is that the case. The remote inspector's test is typically taken off of the most convenient line, and then when you bring that 1-inch line down the wall, and I think I tried to explain this in my presentation, and I showed it in illustration format. When you fill a system, systems fill like a pool. They don't fill like a tidal wave. So the minute water crosses down into that 1-inch drop down to the remote inspector's test valve, well, no more air is going to be, and you are back where you started, which caused all these problems. You get trapped air in a system. And this is what was specifically addressed in 2007 when they added the language not recommending the remote inspector's test valve be installed because it purposely trapped air in the system. So this person's question, in my opinion, was answered in the annex section of NFPA 13 as to why you should not do a remote inspector's test.
Question may have came from potentially an NFPA committee member.
I would, I think I also noticed that person chose to answer as anonymous, or excuse me, send the question as anonymous. They certainly, I'll gladly give them my name and phone number. There was people that were involved in the air vent requirements that were against it, and were very vocally against it. And I was one of the people who, even during discussions about it, brought up the fact that inspectors' test valves are not good air vents in the majority of their installations because they're oftentimes combined with drain valves. So therefore, their physical location is not good. And I can't. I would, trust me, I would be the first one to acquiesce if you came back and said, if you had language in there that said that it's an acceptable air vent if there's accommodations for how it is fed, how it gains access to the system water, then I wouldn't have a problem with it. But as it is written up in current NFPA 13 and with the very specific language, and I literally read it, I read it in my presentation.
Yep.
So.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I don't even know if that was really worded as a question, but more.
It was a statement, and there's 2 or 3 people that I know are against it, and I said, it's amazing. I actually know some of the individuals that were say instrumental in getting that added to the 2019 code, and after having a discussion with them, showing them various piping layouts and explaining to them, my rationale, they agreed with me and supported an effort to actually get that removed in subsequent NFPA 13.
Right.
Now, I don't know if that's going to get any legs on it, but I can tell you that most people with any form of common sense realize that if NFPA 13 specifically says remote inspector tests are not good because they introduce air, and then on the other hand go, well, yeah, but you can use it as an air vent, I'm sorry, you'd have to be an idiot to not realize the
Right.
contradiction there.
Right. You can use it as long as you're also using it for something else that is not being used for that intended form.
Right.
Yeah, gotcha. Okay, next question. What concern is there for corrosion of the heads?
Okay.
What standard needs to be followed and enforced as far as cleanliness of heads and heads that have buildup of dust and debris? Not really sure this had much to do with your presentation per se,
No, but
but
it was a great question though, because um, within my presentation, it was a discussion of corrosion.
right.
After reading that question, I'm the first to admit I build bronze ball valves. I don't build sprinkler heads, but that's a very valid question. So what
Mhm.
I did is I reached out to a few different manufacturers of sprinkler heads and asked them that question.
Right.
And I actually got, I said, I can answer this two ways. I can be, well, NFPA section 5.2.1.1.1, 2017, any sprinkler showing signs of the following shall be replaced: leakage, corrosion, detrimental to performance, physical damage, and loss of fluid in the bulb or responsive element, loading detrimental to performance, or paint require the head to be replaced. Those are the 6 criterias of visible inspection on a sprinkler head, corrosion being one of them. It's the only listing in NFPA 25 for corrosion and a sprinkler head kind of in the same sentence.
Now,
Okay.
here's my personal follow-up question to that, and it's something that among fitters and office people kind of gets thrown around a lot. What excuse me, what amount of corrosion do you consider detrimental?
So it's funny, that's what I asked to the head manufacturers.
Right.
And the numbers ranged from a very singular answer. If you have visible corrosion, no percentage, no surface area, no. If you in your inspection see corrosion on the head or the escutcheon, that head has to be replaced. It
Right.
also should prompt an investigation. And this was so one of the other manufacturers, we had a great conversation. And he said that it was interesting because he talked about how if you have visible corrosion on a head,
Hmm.
it is typically indicative of you have a bigger systemic problem on the inside of the pipe.
Okay.
So so he said, then you're like your next criteria you should be looking at is, do you have any visible corrosion on second tier related products? Assuming that steel is going to have visible corrosion, but if all of a sudden you see corrosion issues, say on bronze valves, around them, or you see it at couplings, where you can see very visible indications of corrosion on steel, if you're seeing it on a head, you should go look at your secondary level of products installed on that system and see if you have a corrosion, because that's potentially means you have a bigger issue.
Right.
The
Now, sorry, go ahead. Finish up with your second point.
Well, the second thing he said, the one manufacturer said that I thought was good. He goes, especially with the different sprinkler heads that they manufacture, between wax coated, the nickel plated, the various special hazard type head that they do. He goes, if you have visible corrosion on a sprinkler head, you have to look at and you can say, look at the internal. So what's going on with the system? Is it really a corrosive water? Well, what is the corrosive atmosphere? So he talked about a CPVC system. You
Right.
got CPVC, but you got corrosion on the head. Okay, well, is it an atmospheric issue? You can't change the water, you can't change the atmosphere very easily, so you got to change the head to a more appropriate head.
Yep.
So it was actually I appreciated this question because it prompted research and questions to the head manufacturers. So
Another thing, and you can confirm if you've heard this as well, but I've also heard, just phone a fitter essentially. Excessive corrosion on sprinklers can be brought on by grounding of the electrical systems.
I have heard about the Vampire Electric story.
Hmm.
That you've got this Vampire Electric rolling through. We've had people call us and say, hey, we've got this system. Your valves are only a couple of years old, and the handle and the plate have rusted aggressively.
Oh,
And
okay.
because those are steel. So
Yep.
that would give them a visual indication. And I said, okay, you know, is it near salt water? Is it in a parking garage? What's the environment? Is it a moist area? You know, well, no. I said, okay, any chance you've got a wire laying around this thing? And then I've had multiple guys come by and say, you know, it turns out, yeah, we had some wires that were laid right across the pipe, right by the floor control, and anything steel within a certain distance of this actually, you know, showed greater signs of corrosion.
Really?
Yeah. And unfortunately, we've even tried in the past, not successfully, but we've tried in the past to like coat. We had one customer who was putting our test and drain valves out in a exposed staircase in Florida, very close to the water. So we actually had to make them corrosion resistant handles and plates.
Wow.
So
Kind of in line with that, I remember doing a small relocate job at a facility we service, and just pop the tiles up, kind of start scoping out the work, and you just get that feeling that something's not right, right? Like just one
yeah,
of those, like, you know, don't do anything, right? Don't touch anything. So we start looking around a little bit, very uneasy, get down off the ladder, have go get the maintenance guy come around, take a look. He pops his head up and is like, yeah, you know, something just doesn't feel right. So he gets the electrician to come up. He comes up, puts his tester on the pipe, 600 volts.
oh, no kidding.
There was a
That's
wire.
sick.
Yeah, there was a wire like 2 or 3 rooms down that had frayed off and was laying across the pipe. The entire system was charged with 600 volts.
So then you start wondering, how in the world did you not have problems at the flow switch wiring connection? What's going on there? You
Yep.
start thinking about, you know, certainly there's galvanic related corrosion.
Yep.
I would
So
start thinking about all the other things you cook.
Yeah, and it may have been there for like a week or a month or something like that. I doubt it was there for years, but it was just, we were that close. Like 600 volts is like you touch it and you don't let it go because it won't let you go, right?
Right. Yeah.
So,
It's dead.
you know, 120 is like, ooh, ha, yeah, but 600, you hold on to that and you don't let it go. Imagine going to back out a drop.
Yeah.
It's getting popped with 600 volt. It was just one of those things where you're just like, you know, when you look up at 3.5 or 5-inch pipe and you just get that feeling, that uneasy feeling. It was that same kind of gut feeling where it's like, I'm not touching it. I'm not touching it yet. I gotta get a better look at it.
Hair standing up on the back of your neck at that point.
Yeah, and the guy was like, yeah, man, you would have, you almost died. Thanks, electrician. That's great.
Well,
All right.
God knows the animosity between our industry and the electricians and the HVAC guys.
That's not what I'm here for. That's not.
Yeah.
Next question. If the remote inspectors test lines aren't efficient, we continue to use inspectors test at the very end of our last branch line?
Well, I would sit down and say, you do in some jurisdictions, but there is specific NFPA language that says you don't have to. You know, if you know, again, not to make this a dead horse, but you know, in 2007, they added the specific language that said to minimize the amount of air in a system, you can move the remote inspectors test, you know, preferably to the supply of the system to test the flow switch.
Right.
So
kind of getting back to that first and second, well, not the second, but the first answer there. Yeah, but I think we touched that one already pretty good. What is the difference in benefit to using the end-of-line ITV and introducing new oxygenated water versus getting rid of the actual air or free air in the lines? Any idea?
Well, I mean, you've got two things in that sentence.
Right.
You know, so if I break it down, the first part, what's the difference in benefit of using an end of line and introducing new air versus getting rid of the air? Well, so hold on. If you have, again, beating that horse, if you have that end of line inspector's test valve,
yep,
and from the valve up to where you're attaching is full of air, well, you're not getting rid of any of the air in the system.
That's right.
So there's no difference there. You're not getting it out. And that's back to the original problem. You know, now when you have getting rid of the actual air or free air in the lines, I think there's some discussion in the industry where people say, well, air eventually becomes non-corrosive. And there is, and I've heard some other industry people talk about this. This isn't that big a deal because the systems deoxygenate. I mean, all systems kind of leak, and the air is going to just naturally aspirate out over time, and the corrosive elements of it are going to, deoxygenate, and then you don't have corrosion anymore. And then, I found that some of the guys that are promoting some of the, say, more expensive systems are a proponent of, well, if you deoxygenate a system, you stop corrosion. I agree with them. I mean, but I think it's somewhat impractical. It's an expensive solution to think that the only way to do that is to purposely introduce some other medium to deoxygenate a system, or that a system will just naturally deoxygenate itself.
Right.
I don't hide behind the science of this and say, well, systems just naturally deoxygenate. They do to an extent, but the whole extent that they're doing that, they're doing it and causing corrosion. So, if you counted on only the system's natural aspiration ability to deoxygenate, and that is your only methodology of doing corrosion prevention, with the because one of the things that ties into that, they'd say, okay, that was probably fine 40 years ago when everything was scheduled 40 pipe, and
Right.
that you had the time in the wall thickness to have a certain amount of corrosion related, degradation in the pipe, yet still maintain the structure and come up to a certain amount where, as you've had that deoxygenation and corrosion reaction, you still didn't ruin the pipe. Well, guess what? You're not going to get that in Schedule 7. You're not going to. I mean, you're barely getting it in Schedule 10, and you're certainly not going to get it. You don't have the time for
Right.
this to do that. So, that's why I disagree with some other people in the industry that say, well, systems just naturally deoxygenate and that'll stop corrosion. No, that's just not practical with what we're making systems out of now.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Yeah. So the last question for you, and then we can let you carry on with the rest of your evening here. Seems like the most remote and highest point of the system would be best for the inspectors test to vent air and to ensure all the piping actually has water in it. And based off of every other question we've had, I mean, that seems like that would be the agreeing, that would be an agreement there.
Right. With the, with the somewhat, say, a caveat that the inspector's test, and again, I think I said in the beginning of this, there's actually in NFPA 13, there's nothing identified specifically as the inspector's test valve. I mean, that's a slang term that's actually used as called the alarm test connection.
Mm-hmm.
So, that's not ensuring that the entire contents of the pipe is full of water, ensuring, say, the pipe actually has water in it. You're testing the flow switch. If that was the case, then you'd have some other products that are available in the market that don't even have water in it that can also test. So I have a little bit of a concern with how that question is worded. The other issue you would have is you said, well, it seems like if you had it at the remote and highest point. The problem I have with that is those two can be in contradiction to each other. If I was to look at a common Walmart manufactured, that these new Walmart grocery stores are making, the highest point in the system is the front of the store. So that's actually the closest to the inbound water supply.
Yeah.
Where is the typical remote inspector's test on that valve, which they do put in? They're taking off one of the lowest points right above the exit door in the back left corner.
The back, yep.
So that remote inspector's test valve is completely full of water and has little to no access to the air. And I can't imagine a contractor is going to run a line secondary from the front of the store all the way back to feed that. It's just unbelievably impractical. So here, you have the highest point and the remote are completely in contradiction to each other.
Right.
So I think that is one of the issues I'd have with how that person worded that question.
Awesome. And another thing to keep in mind, this was I believe you had an hour and a half presentation that was originally scheduled for Phoenix.
Yeah.
That had to get dropped down to 20 minutes. So
my goal was to make it 15.
Yeah.
Well, I knew Matt and those guys take longer.
Yeah. Ours went over about I think we went about 25 minutes, and I was just like, hey, are we good with going a little long? Like I've been editing it down and editing it down, but that's like, you know,
Well,
of
I
our
thought you and
entire
Joe,
presentation,
yeah,
we've got to try to tell people how they can get social media and digital media. Like we didn't even touch on the, you know, email campaign. We didn't even touch on using technology in inspections and testing and things like that. These are like an hour and a half is going to be tight once we get down to it, right? We had to just chop and chop and chop and try to keep people interested for 20 minutes, right?
and to be honest with you, you know, if I'm looking over the topics of presentation, my discussion on corrosion is boring as hell. In fact, it was some of my own employees that were chiming in during the presentation, being like, "Jesus, you are boring to listen to." It was actually pretty comical. The versus when I listened to you and Joe Meyer's, you know, presentation, I'm going, these guys need 2 hours because they're the future in multiple levels. I think there's various aspects of, I mean, he's got a spectacular blog. I mean, I've been a fan of his stuff for years. I mean, the guy should be a cartoon artist besides being a system artist.
Yeah.
His artwork is creative. I'd love to actually get some of it and mount it. But I think what you're discussing is the stuff that the next generation of people coming up in management positions need to understand better. You know, between what's your social media presence? Do you know what's going on various platforms that you know, is about your company? I mean, you know, you could have a guy on a cell phone out there, he's wearing your company shirt, and there could be some horrendous stuff put out there. So, and I think that's a whole area that in your expanded format, if, you know, when they do the show in Vegas in 2021, or I mean, I hope you guys can give some discussion time to stuff like that.
Yeah, we're still to the hour and a half in Vegas at the Cosmopolitan. I believe it's the 10th to 14th, something like that. Check the website just in case I'm wrong. But yeah, that's I appreciate you saying that. It's a weird topic when you look at the past conferences and expos and things like that. Social media and digital media has not been a topic that's around, so it's going to be interesting to see how many people are interested and tuned in and come to see us present, just to see who's actually interested in paying attention to that aspect of marketing, because it's getting big. You know, if you go on, I mean, for me, I'm sure it's 100% targeted, but I go through my Facebook and now I'm seeing Victaulic advertising on Facebook, and that's fantastic. And you know, Reliable has been making awesome kind of history cartoons on how they develop. I think they developed the solder link sprinkler, like the history of that, and that's the way that people need to get that information out there. And you guys are doing that at AGF with the online university, AGF University. It's
We're a big
awesome.
fan of AGFU.
Oh yeah, it's awesome. Like it's and that's the way. I'm beating a dead horse here. Over the past month I've been talking about this, but I think everybody's going to kind of see a change in the way companies are run, education is delivered, and just overall business is done. I think this is, everybody's been talking about it being the internet age for the past 30 years, but I think now that everybody is being forced to work from home, they're going to realize how easy it is to start your own business and be successful.
Yeah.
You don't need an office, and you don't need 10,000 square feet of warehouse. You can order your material online now and have it delivered directly to your job site.
Right. And there's, to me, there's good, there's good and positive sides of that, and there's also scare the hell out of you sides to that. You know, one of the first examples I'll bring up is we were sitting in an NFSA E&S meeting not too long ago, and we had a very good discussion about the movement of the sprinkler industry to sourcing abroad. And yeah, we all know that a lot of manufacturers, I mean, I very proudly make the majority of everything I make in America or North America. A lot of guys are making it in other areas, what we're seeing is this third category coming in where you're seeing, one of the guys in the group ordered a half a dozen sprinkler heads on Amazon, and these things came in a bag. Like the one delivery came in a paper envelope. There was no head protection on it. There was bolt protection. I mean, look, it just came in a paper envelope. So, I have a huge concern as a manufacturer who, has a certain expectation that the qualified people people have an expectation that I make good products and that they don't ever get bad valves and stuff like that.
Yep.
There's a concern on the manufacturing side that as this new dawn of all things electronic and everybody's ordering online and you don't have as much a personal connection, you just go by the almighty price. You go, hey, you do have to apply a little bit of common sense here.
That's right. And it's crazy. I remember, not when Amazon first came out, but I remember when I first started paying attention and oh, Amazon's a thing. The first thing I looked up, being a sprinkler nerd, is fire sprinklers, right? And seeing you can get valves, you can get everything on Amazon, which if you pay attention and you get the alerts, there are a lot of false UL listing sprinklers going out there where they're not actually listed, they're not actually coming from Tyco or Victaulic or something like that. There's fakes out there, and it's weird to see that penetrating the fire protection market. It's really, really weird to me.
It certainly is a concern of ours. Thankfully, I have not seen any AGF stuff on Amazon. I can tell you though, I have seen and have purchased whenever it comes online. I see our valves and some of our devices on eBay, and I crack up because it's typically it's something to do with shipping or extra order, and it's somebody who has no idea what the hell they're selling.
Right.
And and I'll come back and I'll offer them, money, and they'll be like, no, it needs to be this. I'm like, no. Trust me, you want to sell it to me.
Yep.
But yeah, so and again, I don't want to, I'm not bashing any of this stuff. I know a lot of guys have moved everything electronic. I'm saying as a domestic US manufacturer, that's the new media of everything. The training has been great.
Right.
Companies like Viking and Vic and all these guys have made incredible training. NFSA has spectacular training resources. I think AGF, and you've certainly been exposed to us. You've been exposed to the combined training facilities we have with General Air products and the intensity that we do. Before all this happened, we were doing about 4 to 6 training sessions in our labs for people flying in from all over the country a week.
Yeah.
And now very quickly, Ray Fremont and I have had to transition. Now we're doing stuff like this. We're doing much better online, but we're doing combined online training. And not to put in a shameless plug for AGFU, but if anyone in your listening audience says, hey, we need to keep our guys busy, could be fitters, let's talk about service and repair of compressors. Let's talk about what are you doing when you go in and see different valves, see pressure gauges, relief valves, things like that. We can make it fitter oriented to designer oriented, however they want. It can be a 20-minute, 30-minute, or grab a 6-pack and we'll talk about stuff.
If you ever want to do I was thinking about that actually the other day, about setting up essentially like an after work bar room kind of thing, where just a talk sprinkler, get a bunch of fitters to log into like a go-to meeting. I can get up to 250. I wouldn't want 250 different fitters in here, but just get guys in here and just talk about things that they see, right? And that's getting the dialogue. Excuse me, just getting a dialogue going.
I think if people stepped back and said, we're 2 months into a paradigm shift in how people communicate, in the fact that we've gone from personal face-to-face on many levels, be it your daily life to business life, that, if you asked me 2 months ago what the hell Zoom was, I'd have, okay, it means drive fast. I don't know. But in the span of 6 weeks, I'm training probably 5-6 times a week. I'm jumping from GoToMeeting, GoToWebinar, Zoom, Teams, Skype, and I'm going, okay, so I'm jumping through all these platforms and they are evolving, and almost every 3 or 4 days I'm getting an update. So where you're talking about, hey, we can handle 250. Well, how cool is it going to be in 2 months or 3 months when you have 250 and you can have breakout rooms, which Zoom just added, and
That's
you can
right.
say,
Yep.
we're going to have 8 simultaneous subjects going on in this 140-minute bar discussion, and you can jump from table to table. And you want to listen in on, AGF shit? Yeah, cool. You want to listen and go over and learn about General Air's products, or jump in on sprinkler heads, and you can jump in and out of this. And I think we're just getting started in how we can utilize this.
That's right. Well, so just putting it out there, next week is home fire sprinkler week.
Cool.
So I wonder maybe we can set something up that way where we get a bunch of guys on and talk about what they think about residential sprinklers in the future. But
we did a just to give a plug for the Home Fire Sprinkler Coalition.
Yep.
We just got done in conjunction with a couple different industry manufacturers, Watts, Viking, Potter. We redesigned the Home Fire Sprinkler Coalition's physical display. So they get a stipend from the government, and they
Right.
give grants out to local fire departments to build displays of residential sprinklers. And last year, we used an intern for the whole summer. He had to take their original design, redesign a new display that was simple to make, durable, could be interchangeable in parts, had to roll, so that was my big thing, had to be mobile, had to roll through a common doorway. We had all these criteria, and then I had an intern spend the summer recreating the engineering drawings, recreating the installation instructions, recreating it all, and they've just rolled this new display for fire departments all over the country. And what they do now is you go through Home Fire Sprinkler.
Yep.
If you get the grant, then they send me like, okay, this fire department needs a kit. We make the kit. So all the Blaze Master's already pre-cut, the backflow preventer, the flow switch, the test and drain valve, a concealed, a sidewall, all the like representative residential heads comes in a box. So all the fire department has to do is put 2x4s. We even use Delran board because it makes it real durable. We recommend the dimensions and then all the stickers. So, I gladly, if you're doing something Home Fire Sprinkler, I could drop the graphics and say, okay, this is out there now.
Yep. Yeah, absolutely. Is it the same one that's it's
like triangular?
Long, yeah, that's the one. Yeah. I built one of those when they first came out with it. I built 2 of them, gave one to a local fire department, and then the other one sitting in our front office at the shop, and I use it for presentations all the time.
Right. And we just,
awesome.
I looked at that thing when I was actually at the state fire marshal's office in Kentucky, and was in their office. They had one there in the office, and everything about that physical display was built wrong. Like, just wasn't right. And I walked in, I said, well, you can't have that pipe like that. That should be over here. This should be there.
Right.
And over the span of a year or two, when I talked to different people, and if it wasn't Kentucky, it was somewhere, it was one or the other. When I talked to Peg Paul at HFSC, and I just said, hey, and she said, look, this is what we do. The problem that we get sometimes is the fire departments get the grant, but they have some trouble sometimes finding somebody who's knowledgeable to work with them on their time frame when they happen to have the time to build this thing, for then someone to come in and coordinate putting it all together and then getting the supplier to donate it. And that's when I stepped in and said, well, hold it. Let's redesign it to make it smaller and mobile, and then let's just bring in the industry guys and have them all give me this. I'll coordinate it and build it like a kit, and then then we'll get uniformity, and it just works better.
Awesome. That's awesome. Supposed to be a 20-minute conversation. Every time me and you talk, we go for like an hour. It's I have no problem with it. Anything else you want to say? When's the next class that anybody could tune into to agfmanufacturing.com? When's the next course that you have?
There is a geared towards facility managers. There's a class on next Wednesday at 1, I think, is a riser pack class. So we're just going to be talking about sectional floor controls.
Okay.
Who makes them? What do they look like? What are the different configurations, different arrangements? I actually reference ours, but I also talk about other manufacturers. Say, hey, you may encounter this, that. here's what you would do if you build it in the field. Here's what we build in the shop.
Yep.
So we're doing that. We're shying away right now talking about the freeze protection stuff because it's starting to get hotter out.
Yeah.
Still talking about air vents. I think we have one on the Thursday at 11. But if you go to agfmfg.com, there's a link there for AGFU, and that'll give you our schedule. And we also do one, if anyone it comes back and says, look, we don't want to be part of one. We want one specific to a topic or specific to our company. We've been doing that now where guys are doing like SFP. When we did that, they do a power hour lunch. And so they just have all their employees, they're buying everybody lunch, or we'll chip in and we'll actually get Panera available to them. Panera's been really good nationally. I don't know how it is up in Canada, but they've been open through everything and they have great drive-throughs, so it's really good for lunch.
Small town, we don't have one of those around here. Not a small town.
Okay. But so we've been doing a lot of these little power 30-minute presentations specific to a contractor or specific to an engineering office. So it's like 10 people in a conversation.
Yeah, that's perfect because then you get the dialogue, right? You get that dialogue. Awesome. Yeah,
and we've had a couple, we had one where the engineer was it was so laid back, and the guy asked a couple questions, and I was like, well, look, I don't know. And I picked up my cell phone on the call, and I called some friends at Viking, and I said, hey man, I'm going to add you into this call. Can you answer that problem? I mean, because I don't know CPVC from, a hole in the wall.
Yep.
So let me get the guy who's an expert in CPVC on the phone.
Yeah. Don't know CPVC from the hole in the wall that I had to make to fix it.
Right.
Awesome. Jim, always a pleasure talking to you. Let's get on again soon and chat. I got your number now, so now you're screwed.
Yeah, if you do that residential thing next week, count me in. I'd love to do something with that.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll fire you off an email and we'll set something up. Thanks for coming on. Thanks for clearing up all the questions, and we'll talk again soon.
Thank you. Have a good night.
You too.
Hey everyone, this episode of the Fire Sprinkler Podcast is done. If you liked this episode, leave a review, comment, or hop over to my social media pages and let me know. Just search Fire Sprinkler Podcast on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, or LinkedIn. Don't forget to hashtag Fire Sprinkler Podcast and anything you think I should know about or see. If you have any suggestions for future episodes of the Fire Sprinkler Podcast, email info@firesprinklerpodcast.com. Thanks for listening. We'll see you next time. Take care.